Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to be reading chapter 4 of Where the Red Fern Grows. But before we jump in, we want to always recap on the chapter before. Yesterday we read chapter 3. Chapter 3 was very interesting because Billy finally had enough money to afford those 2 hounds. So first thing he did was he went straight to Grandpa's store, informed Grandpa. Grandpa was shocked, but he's going to go ahead and notify the ad to see if those 2 dogs are available, because it took 2 years for Billy to get that $50. So let's see what chapter 4 has in store for us today. And keep in mind, what is our purpose for reading? It is for pleasure, correct. All right, so here we go, chapter 4. Day after day, I flew to the store. Grandpa would shake his head. Then on Monday, as I'd enter the store, I sensed a change in him. He was in high spirits, talking and laughing with a half a dozen farmers. Every time I caught his eye, he would smile and wink at me. I thought the farmers would never leave, but finally the store was empty. Grandpa told me the letter had come. The kennels were still there. And the dogs and they had dogs for sale. He said he had made a mail buggy wait while he made out an order. And another thing, the dog market had gone downhill. The price of the dogs had dropped $5. He handed me a $10 bill. Now, there's still one stump in the way, he said. The mail buggy can't carry things like dogs, so they'll come as far as the depot in Telegua, but you'll get the notice here because I ordered them in your name. I thanked my grandpa with all my heart and asked him how long I'd have to wait for the notice. He said, I don't know, but it still shouldn't take more than a couple of weeks. How exciting. I asked how I was going to get my dogs out of Telegua. I believe I'm saying that right. Well, there's always someone going in, he said, and you can ride in with them. That evening, the silence of our supper was interrupted when I asked my father the question, Papa, how far is it to Kentucky? I may as well have exploded a bomb. For an instant, there was complete silence, and then my older sister giggled. The 2 little ones stared at me. With a half-hearted laugh, my father said, well, now, I don't know, but it's a pretty good way. What do you want to know? What do you want to know for? Thinking of taking a trip to Kentucky? No, I said. I just wondered. My youngest sister giggled and asked, can I go with you? I glared at her. Mama broke the conversation. I declare, what kind of question is that? How far is it to Kentucky? I don't know what's going into that mind of yours lately. You go around like you were lost and you're losing weight. You're as skinny as a rail. You look at your hair. Just last Sunday, they had a haircutting over at Tom Rowland's place, but you didn't go. You had to go prowling around the river and the woods. And I told Mama that I'd get a haircut next time they had cutting. And I just heard some fellows talking about Kentucky up in the store and wondered how far away it was. Much to my relief, the conversation ended. The days dragged, the weeks passed, and still no word about my dogs. Terrible thoughts ran through my mind. Maybe the dogs were lost. The train had wrecked. Someone stole my money. Perhaps the mailman lost my order. Then at the end of the 2nd week, a notice came. My grandfather told me that he had talked to Jim Hoggs that day. He was going into town in about a week and I could ride with him to pick up my dogs. Again, I thanked my grandfather. I started from home. Walking along in deep thought, I decided it was time to tell my father the whole story. I fully intended to tell him that evening. I tried several times, but somehow I couldn't. I wasn't scared of him, for he never whipped me. He was always kind and gentle, but for some reason, I don't know why, I just couldn't tell him. That night, I snuggled deep in the soft folds of the feather bed. I lay thinking. I had waited so long for my dogs, and I so desperately wanted to see them and hold them. I didn't want to wait a whole week. In a flash, I made up my mind. Very quietly, I got up and put on my clothes. I sneaked into the kitchen and got one of Mama's precious flour sacks. In it, I put 6 eggs, some leftover cornbread, a little salt, and a few matches. Next, I went to the smokehouse and cut off a piece of salt pork. I stopped at the barn and picked up a gunny sack. I put the flour sack inside the gunny sack. Then I rolled it up and crammed lengthwise in a bib of my overalls. I was on my way. I was going after my dogs. Tahlequah was a small county town with a population of about 800. By the roads, it was 32 miles away. But as the crow flies, it was only 20 miles. I went as the crow flies, straight through the hills. Although I'd never been to the town in my life, I knew the direction to take. Tahlequah and the railroads laid on the other side of the river from our place. It had the Frisco Railroad on my right and the Illinois River on my left. Not far from where the railroads crossed the river lay the town of Tahlequah. I'm gonna have to look up that word, I'm not kidding, to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm not, I sincerely apologize. I knew if I bored to the right, I would find the railroad. And if I bored to the left, I had the river to guide me. Sometime that night, I crossed the river on a riffle somewhere in the Dipping Spring County. Coming out of the river bottom, I scadded up a long hogback ridge and broke out on top in the flats. In a mile-eating trout, I moved along. I had the wind of the deer, the muscle of a country boy, a heart full of dog love, and a strong determination. I wasn't scared of the darkness of the mountains, for I was raised in those mountains. On and on, mile after mile, I moved along. I saw faint gray stakes appear in the east. I knew daylight was close. My bare feet were getting sore from the flint rocks and saw briers. I stopped beside the mountain stream, soaked my feet in the cool water, rested for a spell, and then started on. After leaving the mountain stream, my pace was much slower. The muscles of my leg were getting stiff. Feeling the pangs and hunger gnawing at my stomach, I decided I would stop and eat at the next stream I found. Then I remembered I had forgotten to include a can in which to boil my eggs. I stopped and built a small campfire. Cutting off a nice thick slab of salt pork, I roasted it, and with a piece of cold cornbread, made a sandwich. Putting out my fire, I was on my way again. I ate as I trotted along. I felt much better. I came into Tahlequah from the northeast and the outskirts of the town. I hid my flour sack and provisions, keeping my gunny sack. I walked into town. I was scared of Tahlequah and the people. I had never seen such a big town and so many people. There were store after store, some of them 2 stories high. The wagon yard and the wagons on top of wagons, teams, buggies, and horses. 2 young ladies about my age stopped, stared at me, and then giggled. My blood boiled, but I couldn't understand. After all, I had 3 sisters. They couldn't help it because they were women folks. I went on. I saw a big man coming up the street. A bright, shiny star on his vest looked as big as a bucket. I saw the long black gun at his side, and I froze in my tracks. I heard of sheriffs and marshals, but had never seen one. Stories repeated about them in the mountains told how fast they were with their gun. And now many of the men had killed. The closer I came, the more frightened I got. I knew it was the end for me. I could just see him aiming his big black gun and shooting me between the eyes. It seemed like a miracle that he had passed me, hardly glancing at me, breathing a sigh. I walked on, seeing the wonders of the world. Passing a large store window, I stopped and stared. There in the window was the most wonderful sight I've ever seen. Everything under the sun, overalls, jackets, bolts of beautiful cloth, new harnesses, collars, brittles, and my eyes did pop open. And then my eyes did pop open. There were several guns, and one of them had 2 barrels. I couldn't believe it. 2 barrels? I'd seen several guns, but never one with 2 barrels. Then I saw something. The sun was just right, and the plate glass was a perfect mirror. I saw the full reflection of myself for the first time in my life. I couldn't see that I looked a little odd. My straw-colored hair was long and shaggy, and the bushes end was bushed out like a corn tassel that had been hit by a wind. I tried to soothe it down with my hands. It helped some, but not much. What it needed was a good combing, and I had no comb. My overalls were patched and faded, but were clean. My shirt had pulled out. I tucked it back in. I took one look at my bare feet and winced. They were brown as dead sycamore leaves. The spiderweb pattern of raw red scratches looked odd in the saddle brown skin. I thought, well, I won't have to pick any more blackberries or the scratches will soon go away. I pumped up one of my arms and thought surely the muscles was going to pop right through my thin blue shirt. I stuck out my tongue. It was as red as pokeberry juice, and anything that color was supposed to be healthy. After making a few faces at myself, I put my thumb in my ear and was making mule ears that when an old woman came by. They stopped and stared at me. I stared back. As they turned to go in their way, I heard one of them say something to each other. The words were hard to catch, but I did hear one word, wild. As I said before, I couldn't help it. They were women folks. As I turned to leave, my eyes fell again on the overalls and the bolts of cloth. I thought of my mother, father, and sisters. Here was an opportunity to make errands for leaving home without telling anyone. I entered the store. I bought a pair of overalls for Papa. After telling the storekeeper how big my mother and sisters were, I bought several yards of cloth. I also bought a large sack of candy. Glancing down at my bare feet, the storekeeper said, I have some good shoes. I told him I didn't need any shoes. He asked if it would be all right. I nodded. He added up the bills. I handed him my $10. He gave me my change. After wrapping the bundles, he helped me put them in my sack. Lifting it to my shoulders, I turned and left the store. Out on the street, I picked out a friendly-looking old man and asked him where the depot was. He told me to go down to the last street and turn right. Go as far as I could, and I couldn't miss it. I thanked him and started on my way. Leaving the main part of the town, I started up the long street, though, through the residence section. I had never seen so many beautiful houses, and they were all different colors. The lawn was neat and clean and looked like green carpet. I saw a man pushing some kind of mowing machine. I stopped and watched the whirling blade. He gawked at me. I hurried on. I heard a lot of shouting and laughing ahead, not wanting to miss anything. I walked a little faster. I saw what was making the noise. More kids than I have ever seen were playing around a big red brick building. I thought some rich man lived there and was giving a party for the children. Walking up to the edge of the playground, I stopped to watch. The boys and girls were about my age and were as thick as flies around a sorghum mill. They were milling, running, and jumping, teeter-totter, and with swings and loaded down with them. Everyone was laughing and having a big time. Over against the building, a large blue pipe ran up at an angle from the ground. A few feet from the top there was a bend in it. The pipe seemed to go into the building. Boys were crawling into the dark mouth. I counted 9 of them. One boy stood about 6 feet from the opening with a stick in his hand, staring googled eyes, trying to figure out what they were doing. I got surprised. Out of the hollow pipe spurted a boy. He sailed through the air and lit on his feet. The boy with the stick marked the ground where he had landed. All 9 of them came shooting out, one behind another. Each boy landed a new mark with scratching. They ganged around looking at the line. There was a lot of loud talking, pointing, and arguing. Then all lines were erased and the new scorekeeper was picked out. The others crawled back into the pipe. I figured out how the game was played. After climbing on the top of the slide, the boys turned around and sat. One at a time, they came flying down and out, feet first. That one had shot out the one had shot out the furthest was the winner. I thought how wonderful it would be if I could slide down just one time. One boy spying me standing in the corner came over. Looking me up and down, he said, "Do you go to school here?" I said, "School?" He said, "Sure, school. What do you think it was?" "Oh, no, I don't go to school here." "Do you go to Jefferson?" "No, I don't go there either." "Do you go to school at all?" "Sure, I go to school." "Where?" "At home." "You go to school at home?" I nodded. "What grade are you in?" I said I wasn't in any grade. Puzzled, he said, "You go to school at home and you don't know what grade you're in? Who teaches you?" "My mother." "What does she teach you?" I said, "Reading, writing, and arithmetic." "And I bet I'm just as good as you are." He asked, "Don't you have any shoes?" I said, "Sure, I have shoes." "Why aren't you wearing them?" "I don't wear shoes until it gets cold." He laughed and asked where I lived. I said, "Back in the hills." He said, "Oh, you're a hillbilly." He said he ran back to his mom. I saw him pointing at me and talking to several boys. They started their way yelling, "Hillbilly, hillbilly." Just before they reached me, a bell started ringing. Turning, they ran to the front of the building, lining up in two long lines, and marching like little tin soldiers, disappearing into the school. The playground was silent. I was all alone and felt lonely and sad. I heard a noise to my right. I didn't have to turn around to recognize what it was. Someone was using a hoe. I know that sound if I heard it in the dark night. It was a little old white-headed woman working in the flower bed. Looking again at the long blue pipe, I thought, there's no one around. Maybe I could have one slide anyway. I eased over and looked up into the dark hollow. It looked scary, but I thought of all the other boys I had seen crawl into it. I could see the last mark on the ground. I thought, I bet I can beat that. Laying my sack down, I started climbing up. The farther I went, the darker and more scarier it got. Just as I reached the top, my feet slipped. Down I sailed. All the way down, I tried to grab onto something, but there was nothing to grab. I'm sure some great champions had slid out of that pipe, and no doubt more than one world record had been broken. But if someone had been there when I came out, I know the record I set would stand today in all its glory. I came out just like I went in, feet first, belly down. My legs were spread out like a bean shooter stalk. Arms frailing in the air, I zoomed out and up. I seemed to hang suspended in the air at the peak of my climb. I would see the hard-packed ground far below. As I started down, I shut my eyes tight and gritted my teeth. This didn't seem to help. With the splattered sound, I landed. I felt the air swoosh out beneath my teeth. I tried to scream, but had no wind left to make a sound. After bouncing a couple of times, I finally settled down to the earth. I laid spread eagle for a few seconds and then slowly got to my knees. Hearing louder laughter, I looked around. It was a little old lady with the hoe in her hand. She hollered and asked how I liked it. Without answering, I grabbed up my gunny sack and left. Far up the street, I looked back, and the little old lady was sitting down, rocking with laughter. I couldn't understand these town people. If they were staring at a fella, they were laughing at them. And that's the end of chapter 4. So Billy has made his way into this town to retrieve his dogs, but he hasn't quite made it to his dogs yet. He is experiencing a whole new world to him with this town that he's never seen. He's heard about it, but he's never seen it. Some of the new things, what are some of the new things that Billy has encountered? A school, this new game that he saw people were playing, the women, the gun with the 2 barrels, a sheriff or a policeman that we know it as. So all these are really new for Billy, and he has not quite made it to his hounds yet. I'm pretty sure chapter 5 tomorrow might give us a little more insight about that. All right, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm gonna start asking y'all when y'all view my YouTube channel to see these chapter read alouds. I want you to respond with something that you liked from this chapter. Something that you liked, maybe a wondering, just so I know that you're viewing these. And if you have any questions, let me know, okay? So I will see y'all tomorrow for chapter 5 read aloud. Bye.